Climate change is a major risk facing cities, nations, and the economy. We have to fight it, and I'm all in.
Miami is all in because sea level rise is real.
HP Inc. is all in.
New Belgium is all in because it's the last call for climate action.
We are all in on turning back climate change.
Walmart is all in.
Mars is all in.
We're all in.
All in.
All in.
All in.
America is all in.
I'm all in because it's time to hit climate change out of the park.
Good morning. Welcome to this important Crossroads event. What is the future for the United States as we look to the crossroads of energy and climate at this present time? We are honored to have strong climate champions joining us today from the federal government. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm and Senator Tom Carper. Both have shown inspiring leadership on this issue and are enthusiastic partners for all of the constituencies that are part of America's All In and for working in the United States to create that clean energy future. So thank you, Senator, and thank you, Madam Secretary. Madam Secretary, please share with us your thoughts on why the United States should bet on a clean energy future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariana. It is a good bet. A big thank you to every leader that's part of this wonderful America is all in movement, really. You know, about a decade ago, I was the governor of Michigan, so I completely understand firsthand how local leaders get the job done and set the direction really for the entire country. And I know that you've been leading the charge for climate action in America for much longer than the president and I have been in our current offices. So you have accelerated our progress toward this clean energy future with or without the federal government. And I'm here to assure you that now it is with the federal government. So since day one of the Biden-Harris administration, you've had a partner in the White House. We're super grateful for you. We're learning from you. We're ready to work with you to seize this really once in a generation clean energy opportunity. President Biden is absolutely serious about cutting our carbon pollution in half or more within 8 years and reaching 100% clean power by 2035. And you've been steadfast supporters of these goals since the early days of the administration. We thank you for it. It's not just the minimum we got to do to tackle climate change. It's not just going to create millions of good paying jobs across the country. I mean, these climate goals, I think this is very important given the context, are essential to our energy security as a nation. Putin's invasion of Ukraine has made this very clear. The longer we are tied to global volatile fossil fuel markets, the longer we're going to leave our economy and our national security in the hands of dictators. And we know it doesn't have to be this way. Clean energy gives us the means to increase our energy independence and our security. It's homegrown, it's affordable, it's reliable. We don't have to worry about any wild volatility of the price of solar or wind. We only know the price continues to drop. We don't have to worry about being held hostage to countries who weaponize hydrocarbons and don't share our values. So right now, we have got to deploy, and innovate faster than ever. And so here's how we're doing it. First, we need to maximize what we already have on the books. So the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law alone is not enough to turn the ship around on climate, but it does invest $62 billion through the Department of Energy on our nation's clean energy and grid infrastructure. So we're putting most of this money out via competition, competitive grants, so it can have the best impact for climate and jobs and justice, but we can't do that without you. We've already started mobilizing a lot of these programs, which you can follow by visiting energy.gov/BIL. That stands for Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, energy.gov/BIL. I'm asking you to partner with each other to help your local universities, your companies, your state and city governments, get everybody to apply, send us your best, your most innovative ideas. So, and we've put out a lot of requests for information. So we need your input. And so the second thing that we need to do to build this clean energy future is really the rest of the president's agenda, especially the clean energy tax credits. Those tax credits are going to turbocharge domestic manufacturing of batteries and wind and geothermal and more. We're going to be able to create jobs up and down the supply chain. We'll help more Americans switch to electric vehicles and to heat pumps. And we're going to make America's clean energy transition irreversible and just. So the third thing we need to do is to use every lever at our disposal to accelerate climate action. And I can tell you the Biden-Harris administration is working at that every single day from every single angle, whether it's new climate risk regulations from the SEC or new methane rules from the EPA or stronger fuel efficiency standards for cars and trucks from the Department of Transportation, or requiring all agencies to accelerate sustainable and responsible permitting for clean energy projects. I know all of you have been working on this as well at the local level. And I know you will keep this up. We want you to keep this up. We're asking you to keep this up. We need you to keep this up, whether you're a business that's committed to 100% clean power, or you're a healthcare organization that's mobilizing nurses and parents to reduce asthma risk, or a city that's switched to an all-electric fleet. This is an all hands on deck moment. And thanks to America is All In's analysis, the analysis that you guys have been putting out, we know that as long as we all work together, this clean energy future and a livable climate is doable. It's within our grasp. And of course, states and cities have the power to act independently of the federal government, and you do, often putting bolder ideas into action from which the federal government can learn. That's what the laboratories of democracy are all about. So thank you for being all in on climate. The Department of Energy and this entire administration is right here alongside you. Together, we're going to get this done. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck.
Thank you, Secretary Granholm, for those remarks and for your leadership and commitment to these issues. This is a moment so ripe with opportunity, and it is for us to take. Secretary Granholm framed up some of the discussions that we are hoping to get into with our upcoming panel. And as a former governor yourself, you know better than most the importance of the leadership and the promise of the actions by states, by cities, and by so many other non-federal actors. My name is Mariana Panuncio-Feldman. I'm with the World Wildlife Fund. I am Senior Director for International Climate Cooperation. As part of my role, I coordinate a global initiative called Alliances for Climate Action, a network of national alliances of private sector, local and state governments, academic institutions, civil society, and so many others, so that together they can drive the decarbonization of their own economies. I'm very proud to say that America is All In is part of this global initiative, together with alliances, sister alliances from Australia, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Japan, Mexico, South Africa, and Vietnam. I am so excited to be joining this conversation today. Our panel discussion is meant to highlight a cross-section of community and institutional leaders and provide a snapshot perspective of their priorities, the current actions they are taking, and the potential contributions that all of these actors, together with so many across the US, can make to build and advocate for a clean energy future in the United States. We all know that over the past year and a half, there has been an intense public debate over the scope of federal action on climate. All the while, there have been increasing opportunities for federal and non-federal collaboration on implementation. Secretary Granholm has just showed that this is already happening and has called for more of it to happen. Our speakers today will share their thoughts on the benefits of clean energy, the pitfalls of inaction, and what priorities they see as most critical at this current juncture if we want to accomplish our energy and climate goals. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce the panelists that we have today, which include Lucas Joppa, Chief Environment Officer at Microsoft. Lakiesha Lloyd, a veteran and climate justice advocate from West Virginia. Mark Mitsui, the president of Portland Community College. And Ali Santore, Executive Vice President and Chief Advocacy Officer at Providence, one of the nation's largest health systems. Welcome to you all, and thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so in order to start us off, I want to give each one of you the chance to reflect in your own words, react to the remarks of Secretary Granholm, and address the central question of the conversation we're having today. Why support a clean energy future for the United States? So Lucas, let us start with you.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for allowing Microsoft to be part of this event. I think we can say unequivocally that Microsoft is all in on achieving a climate stable net zero future. At Microsoft, sustainability really cuts across the core of everything that we do. And that's really because of a worldview that we have that says that for Microsoft to do well, we need the world to do well. And for the world to do well, we need to stabilize our climate systems and give societies and economies a predictable future upon which to build. And so when we stepped back and thought about that a few years ago, we came up with some set of pretty succinct commitments to be a carbon negative, water positive, zero waste company that protects more land than it uses. And as a result, we started working really hard towards those goals to be a carbon negative company, to reduce our emissions by half or more, physically remove the rest from the atmosphere, and continue doing that until we've not just zeroed out our annual emissions, but removed all of the emissions since we were founded in 1975. And that's why we think, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was a huge bipartisan success. We're extremely excited to see that move forward. And now we see this really significant opportunity, I think, to work on three things, really. What we call the 3 M's, the meaning, the measurement, and the markets behind how we get to net zero. And so as we think about advancing these policies, and particularly as we think about advancing the investments here in the United States to lead to industrial and grid decarbonization, while also pushing for a more just and equitable transition for frontline and disadvantaged communities, it's really critical that we're crisp about the definition of net zero, what needs to happen and who needs to do it, the measurement of net zero, and then the investments that need to go into maturing the markets behind net zero as well.
Thank you, Lucas. I like that three-way framing of priorities. That's always very helpful to focus our minds. Lakiesha, let's turn to you next. What are your reflections after listening to the Secretary?
Well, first, I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity of being able to be here today. My name is Lakiesha Lloyd. I'm a disabled Army veteran from Charleston, West Virginia, and I'm a mother of 2 boys. I'm proud to be here today as a climate justice organizer with Common Defense. Common Defense is the nation's largest grassroots veteran organization with 300,000 members. And even though we no longer wear the uniform, we still honor the oath we took to protect the people and the Constitution of the United States. For us, that means tackling the biggest threats to our communities, our country, and the world. And at this moment, there is no greater danger facing us than what's posed by climate change. That's why I'm here today to call on Congress to take action, pass legislation to invest in clean, homegrown, renewable energy. Reliance on fossil fuels has become a clear and present danger to our national security. If we do not take bold and immediate action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, America will be set on a path toward catastrophe. An increase in the severity and frequency of extreme weather will stretch our National Guard here at home, while rising sea levels threaten our military installations. Heat waves and droughts will create shortages and scarcity, increasing the chances of global conflict and the possibility of our service members being pulled once again into a disastrous foreign war. In short, doing nothing to address climate will create a perfect storm that will affect our military readiness, and will create more of something we could do with less of, and that's combat veterans. Reliance on fossil fuels is a very real threat here at home. And like many West Virginians, I've experienced the consequences firsthand. You know, my grandfather was a McDowell County resident, fought in World War II. When he came back home from the war, he took the only job available, and that was working in the coal mines. My grandfather crawled in holes no bigger than the width of his body to dig out coal until being forced into retirement due to black lung. You know, he continued to be treated for black lung up until his passing. So now, you know, we're at a situation where now coal jobs are disappearing. Folks here are struggling, especially veterans. And West Virginia has the highest veteran poverty rate of any state in the country. And that was before the pandemic. That was before Putin invaded Ukraine and before big energy companies started jacking up their prices and forcing families to choose to either buy groceries or gas. And the thing about it is, it doesn't have to be this way. You know, we can invest in clean, renewable energy that doesn't poison our water and air, energy that we can rely on. We can create millions of good union jobs, especially for unemployed and underemployed veterans. And so I just ask Congress, do not miss this opportunity. You know, don't keep kicking the can down the road. Step up for this moment, do the right thing for our veterans, our country, and for the world. Thank you for your time.
Wow. Thank you for your past and present service, Lakiesha, and for articulating so powerfully the linkages among our well-being, our community's well-being, energy security, addressing climate change. I think that your voice in today's conversation has been very powerful. Thank you. Thank you. President Mitsui, as a leader of a community college, I think it will be very helpful to hear what is your motivation for supporting a clean energy future.
Thank you, Mariana. And also thank you to Secretary Granholm, Senator Carper, Mayor Lyles, and fellow panelists, Kevin as well, for being here today and organizing this webinar. My name is Mark Mitsui. I use he, him pronouns. I'm president of Portland Community College and a member of Second Nature's Climate Leadership Team, as well as the America's All In Leadership Circle. America's community colleges and universities are all in and can mobilize students, faculty, staff, and administrators and our continuum of missions for the nation's conversion to clean energy. We provide the research, engineering, workforce development, and leadership education to help power the transition to a more equitable, carbon-free future. Take the manufacturing and maintenance of electric vehicles, for example. From the supply chain to the final assembly of the finished car or bus, talent is required. Researchers are needed for new breakthroughs, say in energy storage. Engineers are needed for the design of the vehicle, and skilled technicians are needed to build and maintain these cars. For example, how to repair an electric vehicle without electrocuting yourself is a really important skill. Finally, leaders at every level of the organization are needed to keep turning out better and better electric vehicles. You could say the same thing about wind turbines or electric vehicle charging stations or expanding our nation's electrical grid, which is why it's so important that for every investment in the physical infrastructure for a carbon-free future, there needs to be another investment in the human infrastructure, the human capital that's needed to build that transition. Without that investment, ongoing equity and skills gaps are pretty much guaranteed. These gaps in turn would slow the transition to a carbon-free economy and exacerbate pre-existing social, racial, and economic disparities. So after the intros, I'd love to briefly dive into the intersection of equity, clean energy jobs, and the education and training that can help power this transition. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, President Mitsui, for your contributions and as well for for outlining the fundamental importance of investing on human capital. This is central to the success of the transition. So thank you for putting an emphasis on that. Ali, could you round us out with a perspective grounded on your work with the healthcare system?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. And I want to echo the thanks to Secretary Granholm, Senator Carper, and Mayor Lyles, and my fellow panelists as well. So I serve as Executive Vice President at Providence and Chief Advocacy and Environmental Sustainability Officer. And people don't necessarily connect healthcare with the climate crisis right off the bat. But in healthcare, we are facing a very existential paradox in that we are called to do no harm and we are called to heal. And yet healthcare is one of the primary contributors of greenhouse gas emissions. So our operations are harming our environment, the community that our patients live in, and actually creating direct health impacts for our patients. So at Providence, we believe that we need to step into our responsibility as healers and as contributors to this problem. And that's why we established our goal to become carbon negative by 2030. For the scope of Providence, we are the third largest nonprofit healthcare system operating in 7 Western United States. I often think of Providence as a microcosm of the United States. So we operate in demographically diverse, politically diverse areas such as LA, Seattle, and Portland. And also we're the largest healthcare provider in Alaska, in Western Texas, and Western Montana. So we have established our goal to become carbon negative across all of those states. We are marching forward together because this work is the great equalizer. The US healthcare system contributes about 8.5% of total US greenhouse gas emissions. We operate incredibly carbon intensive real estate footprints, energy footprints, often very inefficient energy footprints. When you think about a new construction of a hospital or when hospitals are updated, we can't shut down our operations. So we have to build over and on top of current operations, which creates an incredibly inefficient patchwork of construction and energy functionality. So we are all in terms of investments from the private sector and the public sector in updating our energy grid and increasing investments in clean energy. We are working across our system to hold ourselves accountable to this healing mission with a special emphasis on environmental justice and a focus on the poor and vulnerable. To move us forward to our goal to become carbon negative, we established the We Act framework. I was so appreciative of Secretary Granholm saying that this is an all hands on deck effort. We couldn't agree more because we believe we act together. So the We Act framework is a call to action, and it's also a mnemonic to outline 5 key components of our strategy. The W is for waste, the E is for energy and water, the A is for agriculture, the C, chemicals, and the T, transportation. The climate investments proposed in the Build Back Better bill and by the Biden administration tackles key components of that strategy. We have invested upfront in Providence in this work by deploying the We Act strategy. From our 2019 baseline, we have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 11.5% across our 51 acute care hospitals. We also have 22 facilities running on 100% renewable energy. We are working as hard as we can within our own abilities, but we need the partnership of the federal government to help support these investments and really drive this transformation across the healthcare sector. The health of our patients, the health of our communities depend on it. I'll close by saying we don't believe that the climate crisis is a public health crisis. We believe it is the public health crisis.
Well, thank you, Ali, for your thoughts. I think that is so important for us to outline the linkages among these issues and the way that you've described the links between climate and health, the greater challenges that this poses to inequity in our country, and the opportunities for us to use this moment, this transition, as an equalizer. I think you put this, and that this is an all hands on deck. Thank you for bringing those reflections. So it is very clear from this conversation that the panelists are bringing the perspective of different constituencies, and different approaches to climate action, but we're also hearing a lot of commonalities. You have heard from all of our panelists that with every passing year, and I would say even every passing month, the climate crisis grows more urgent and more severe. Implementation of climate solutions is a race against the clock, even in the best of circumstances. But we, even as we have climate change hanging over our head as a upcoming and looming and growing potential for disruption, our communities and institutions are dealing with day-to-day challenges, near-term decision points, like right now, dealing with rising prices, with volatile energy costs, and the continued impact of the pandemic. So I want to, rather than shy away from this complexity, I would like, with your help, to lean into this complexity and then say, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges that your community or your organization is wrestling with right now? And then at a time when we all need to be all in and all hands on deck, as the secretary said and Ali underlined, what are some of the factors, and in particular federal policies, that could actually make this more manageable, and it could make all of this more achievable? So curious to hear from any one of you. Maybe Lucas, could we start with you again?
Sure, happy to, yeah. Well, I think we could probably talk all day about the difficulties and complexities that the world and the United States is facing, but I do think there are some pretty clear paths that we need to take, and particularly that companies can take, and I think that the federal government can as well. And that's really, I think, being part of these conversations. But then the second bit is to get basically on the ground and start doing the work and start making the investments. And I really think that it's critical that we start opening up investments in carbon reduction and removal solutions. So when we made our carbon negative commitment, we created $1 billion investment fund to invest in carbon reduction removal solutions. And that becoming an investor is one easy way and one really powerful way to help move markets and to help mature markets. And the federal government has a significant role to play there as well. But when we made our carbon negative commitment, we also quickly became the largest purchaser and customer of carbon removal products and solutions as well. And the government has a huge opportunity to help mature the market through its procurement efforts and ensuring that, companies and the federal government are out there using all of the procurement power that we have to help accelerate the kind of the introduction, the increase in supply and the decrease in cost for carbon reduction removal solutions. So I think, it's very complicated when you get down in the weeds, but at the high level, the world just needs a lot more investment in decarbonization. And I think that the private sector and the public sector both can play important roles in both of those areas.
Thank you, Lucas. Yes. I think that we have a tremendous opportunity if, as you said, we align investments, right? Like if we align, dollars are going to be invested every day. The question is, they're going to be invested in what? And if we can actually align, and as you mentioned, the example of procurement policies, we could move so much faster generally if we moved on this together. I'm curious if any other of the panelists have any further reflection on what are you wrestling with right now, and what will make your job easier?
Mariana, I'd like to build on Lucas's statements of the importance of alignment. And I'm really excited and hope that the Build Back Better bill passes, particularly because of its workforce investments and the alignment of those investments in creating economic mobility while helping the transition to a clean economy, I think is nothing short of dazzling. The possibilities are amazing with that kind of alignment. So I don't know if you've been to Portland before, but we've got a lot of bridges here over the Willamette River. And over time, I've come to think of Portland Community College and indeed higher education in general as one of those bridges. On one end of the bridge, we've got hardworking, capable folks who just need an educational opportunity. And on the other end of the bridge, we've got great jobs, great careers that pay living wages and lead to better lives. And education and training is that bridge. And as we as a country look at crossing the river, so to speak, to a clean, carbon-free future and facilitating equitable prosperity, I believe that investment in human capital, that bridge, and investment in the people who are crossing the bridge will be key to making that transition successful. And to put a few numbers there, in this country, we have over 43 million adults working in low-wage jobs locked into dead-end careers. And we have enough public funding to provide adult basic education and post-secondary ESL to about 1 million out of the 43 million. And with post-secondary education and training, we know that economic mobility is possible and bridging the skills gap in the clean energy sector is possible. And one example of a strategy that works is called integrated education and training. And this is where English language instruction or adult basic education is embedded and contextualized within professional training. So English is taught, for example, within heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Studies show that students pick up English faster, they pick up HVAC faster, they're more likely to graduate and more likely to experience economic mobility. Students get great jobs, employers get skilled bilingual employees from diverse backgrounds, and they also contribute to a cleaner, greener economy. So a quick example, at PCC, we have an HVAC integrated education and training program. Students learn how to properly dispose of used refrigerants, HFCs, and they actually get an EPA certificate that shows that what they have learned. And according to Paul Hawken, as you know, properly disposing HFCs could save the equivalent of 57.75 gigatons of CO2 emissions between 2030 and 2050. So those workforce investments are critical on many fronts. And I want to put a quick word on also for Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. Title II of WIOA funds adult basic education. And so it's up for reauthorization. And if the Build Back Better investments in WIOA Title II can be funded, that would help the community colleges work at the intersection of equity and the transition to clean energy.
Thank you, President Mitsui. And once again, the power of actually thinking systemically and connecting these issues, building capacity and job training in the workforce that is actually allowing us not only to address and to accelerate the transition to a clean energy future, but build the new skill set while integrating communities into this future more effectively. So actually, I would like to stay with the analogy of the bridge and actually make the linkage to investments by the federal government in infrastructure. So as we heard from Secretary Granholm, her agency and others are very enthusiastic to work with businesses, local governments, higher education, and many others. These agencies are empowered by legislation such as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, which passed towards the end of last year. So a question for whomever wants to jump in. Are there programs, I want to build on this last remark from President Mitsui, are there programs within, for example, the IIJA that your organization is looking at to support your efforts to achieve your climate goals? Would anybody want to comment?
Well,
yes,
I know, yes. Well, I mean, as far as that goes, we have here in the state of West Virginia, Workforce West Virginia. It is actually funded through the state and through the Department of Labor. And we actually have a program within Workforce West Virginia that allows minors or people who have been laid off who are, need to be retrained. And they pay for that. They have grants that they give to help those to be able to go back to college and be retrained in a new industry. So one of the many things that we are looking at, because here in the state of West Virginia, just for example, right, we have a severe issue with, not just veterans coming back home and being unemployed, but more so underemployed. More than 500,000 veterans are unemployed, or millions or more are underemployed, and they're stuck working low skill minimum wage jobs that, they're dead ends. There's no room for progress or, movement upwards and growing with a company. So one of the things that we most definitely with Common Defense have been trying to put out there is that in doing so with the provisions and the climate provisions and the reconciliation bill, is that the money that is going to be put towards workforce could actually help expand workforce, expand those programs in which people can go and be retrained in renewable energy jobs. To use West Virginia as an example again, there's no jobs here. You can go into any random person and ask them, what is the one thing that West Virginia needs? And I promise you, almost guarantee you that the answer will always be jobs. Because at the end of the day, the only high paying job that you have here in the state is coal mining. There are no other options. However, if you were to be able to have in place a retraining program to work with community colleges here and regional colleges here within the state, we would be able to get these people retrained and be able to pay for that training and create a workforce that is ready to take on the industry coming into the state. And this goes throughout the country. This goes for any state in the nation, because we all have that issue of veteran underemployment. We look at the unemployment rates, and we're, here in the state of West Virginia, if you was to look at the unemployment rate right now, you'd be like, oh my gosh, it's pretty good. But it's only telling a very small fraction of the story. So we are most definitely looking at, needing that this reconciliation, climate provisions, and the workforce monies that's in those climate provisions to be passed, because they need it. It's very common that it's a very well-known thing that when we come out of the military, we have extreme skills, extreme expertise. However, they don't always necessarily pivot over into civilian jobs. They don't necessarily correlate. And therefore, you have veterans coming home. I'll use myself an example. When I came home from the military, mother of two, I living in Southern West Virginia, I had to live with my mom. I could not find a actual decent paying job to be able to support me and my kids. And unfortunately, that is still very prominent today. And you can go into any state, and I promise you, you will find the exact same thing happening. So we most definitely are looking towards the reconciliation bill and those workforce provisions, because they are so needed. They are so needed for veterans, more so than folks realize. One of the issues that we find that we struggle with when our climate work with Common Defense is that the biggest challenge is that too many people think that veterans are all conservative, right? That we're a monolith, right? But military is extremely diverse, and veterans understand better most than others the cost of our reliance on fossil fuels. We need to have those provisions in place to be able to have that retraining in renewable energy jobs. It has to be. There is no other options for that. Not only is it going to put people back to work and be able to have those good paying union jobs that we need throughout the country, and it's also going to help the overall picture of fighting climate change and stopping our reliance on foreign energy. So, yeah.
Thank you, Lakiesha. Ultimately, if we want to build this clean energy future, we all need to see ourselves in it. And yes, if there are no jobs, how can we do that? I think you've all spoken so powerfully. Thanks to each one of you. As peers and kindred spirits inside and outside of America's All In, I wanna ask you to speak to the broader community and What you said, Lakiesha, and what other colleagues here today have also shown is how important federal action is. And we know that when we talk about federal action, we talk not only about the administration, we also are speaking about Congress. And we know that we have a window right now with reconciliation. So can I ask from each one of you, we need to close our panel very quickly, but just if you can share one action that you or your institution is committed to taking in support of ambitious federal climate policy. And anything that you can say, like super briefly, your action and recommendation for any other communities and institutions that want to be involved at this particular juncture, which is so important for us all.
Yeah, I'll start by noting something that's so important, and that is environmental justice. That's a key focus of ours because we know that those who contribute the least to the problem are impacted the most. So we especially support the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative that will direct 40% of resources to underserved communities in the pursuit of clean water, clean air, access to safe foods, because we see firsthand in our emergency rooms that those who are impacted by these climate change events and extreme weather events are the poor and vulnerable. So I think that the elements within Build Back Better and the infrastructure bill that support climate resilience and a focus on the poor and vulnerable and environmental justice are a key area that we are all in supporting.
One more final action that you want to share, and then we'll bring the panel to a close.
Well, I'll just jump in and say that I think grid decarbonization and investments in that component of our national level infrastructure is, from a climate perspective, absolutely critical to achieving our climate stabilization goals. But it's also at the core of how we are going to build a more resilient national economy over the next 20, 30, and 50 years. We're committed to doing our part on the renewable energy space, and we're excited about the federal government leaning in with investments there as well.
Well, thank you all once again for joining the conversation today, for sharing your expertise, and for your leadership in the different parts of the United States where you are, with the different constituencies that you work with. What makes this possible is that we are all in. So it's so inspiring to see what you've all accomplished and what you're all bringing to this very important moment for the country. With that, I hope that, everybody, at least as we close this panel and move to the next segment, I hope that you have been inspired by this conversation. I know I have, and I hope that you have each one of you who has joined this part of the conversation heard something that you can take back to your organization and to your community. So thank you all. Next, we will have a message from Senator Tom Carper. In his 22 years serving in the US Senate, Senator Carper has been a champion for the climate and actually a champion for ocean protection as well, given the landscapes that so define his home state of Delaware. Senator Carper currently serves as the chairman of the Senate's Environment and Public Works Committee, which has jurisdiction over numerous environmental policy considerations as well as public infrastructure. So he's played a critical role in developing policies within the IIJA. So let's now turn to him for his message.
Hello, everybody. I'm Senator Tom Carper from the first state of Delaware. And I want to say a big thank you to the World Wildlife Fund for inviting me to say a few words today to you as part of the launch of the America is All In initiative. I like that. Addressing the climate crisis is personal for me. For those who may not know, Delaware is the lowest lying state in the nation. We're the first state. We're also the lowest lying state in the nation. Our state is sinking, and the seas around us, unfortunately, are rising. We've got to do something about that, a lot of things about that. People of Delaware and our state's survival depend on bold action on climate change. I look for opportunities to enact climate solutions in all of my work in the United States Senate. That's especially true in my work as chairman of the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works, where I serve alongside of a ranking member, Senator Shelley Capito of West Virginia, my native state. Our committee is responsible, as you may know, for writing many of the laws that protect our air, our water, our environment. We also have jurisdiction over our nation's roads and highways and bridges. And it turns out that those two areas of our committee's jurisdiction are actually related. Our transportation sector is the single largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, single largest emitter. Roughly a third of the emissions carbon emissions come from the cars, trucks, and vans that keep us moving. Fortunately, we don't have to wait for cleaner and more efficient vehicles or clean infrastructure to fuel those clean vehicles. Our nation's largest automakers are already producing zero-emission vehicles with more on the way, a lot more on the way. In Congress, we are working with the Biden administration, all of you, to implement many of the historic climate investments we've made in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is being implemented across the country today. And when our committee began working on a service transportation infrastructure bill, oh Lord, over a year ago, I worked with many of my colleagues, Democrat and Republican, to prioritize reducing transportation emissions and making our infrastructure more resilient to the impacts of climate change. I'm proud to say that we were successful. Actually, it's not game over. We're still working. We're still implementing and doing things across the country to implement the legislation that we passed, and we're making good progress. But working with our ranking member, Senator Capito, our committee unanimously advanced a bipartisan transportation bill over a year ago that included the first ever climate provisions. Our bill went on to serve as the foundation of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which President Biden signed into law last November. The final Bipartisan Infrastructure Law includes our $18 billion climate title, as well as an additional $5 billion for EV charging infrastructure, more than $5 billion for low and no emission transit buses, and $5 billion for low emission and electric school buses. I call them the magic bus. The Biden administration is already putting these funds to work to build out the infrastructure we need to charge our electric vehicles, making our roads more resilient to climate change and reducing emissions in the transportation sector. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law also gives states and cities new opportunities and flexibilities to use traditional highway dollars for innovative new projects that reduce emissions. That includes new eligibility for purchasing electric municipal vehicles and charging infrastructure, new opportunities to use federal highway funds for transit and rail, and more opportunities for expanding walking and bicycling. The law also requires all of our states actually to develop strategies for reducing emissions from the transportation sector. These historic investments have the potential to make a big difference in addressing the growing threat of climate change and creating good paying jobs across our country at the same time. You don't have to make one choice or one or the other. That's a false choice. We can do both, and we need to. But we must do still more to confront the climate crisis and do so as quickly as we can. We all have the responsibility to act in incredible opportunity as well. By building on our climate wins in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, we can create good paying clean energy jobs, make our country a global leader in clean energy, and build a better future for future generations. I'm committed to doing my part in the Senate. I hope you'll be continuing to do your parts as well. So thanks again for the opportunity to just talk with all of you today. Keep up the good work. Remember, teamwork makes the dream work. So it's great being part of your team. God bless you all. Keep up the good work. Bravo Zulu.
Well, we appreciate that insight and important message from Senator Carper. Collaboration is at the heart of America is All In and is essential to building our clean energy future for the benefit of communities across America. So our thanks to the Senator and our strongest wishes and encouragement to him and his colleagues in the Senate as we push for further investments across the finish line. So now with a few minutes remaining, I wanted to turn our attention towards America's All-In's resources and reports that we want to make available to the coalition and to many others who may be interested. So first and foremost, I wanted to share that just a few weeks ago, All-In's experts analytical team, led by the University of Maryland Center for Global Sustainability, released a report detailing possible emission pathways for the United States to strive towards its 2030 climate target, specifically focused on the transportation sector. As mentioned by Senator Harper and others, there is a lot of exciting potential to reduce our transportation emissions through existing policies, but more can be done in order to truly put our goals within reach. Next. You can see on this slide a peek. You can take a quick peek at the policy levers that will help lock in those critical emissions reductions from the transportation sector. Basically, what you can see in the slide and hopefully in the report is that existing policies, state and local action, and federal legislation and regulation all have a role to play to get us there. Next. So sticking to the topic of transportation, All In will have 2 additional reports launching in June of this year. One focused on the public health and economic benefits of transit shifts. And the other will be focused on tactics that communities and institutions across the United States can take to reduce their transportation emissions. These reports will be released, have been developed by our colleagues at RMI and the World Resources Institute and will be made available to all to be part of the solution. Next. And both of these reports will support a broader effort by All In to encourage climate-aligned IIJA implementation and provide ongoing resources and support to coalition members. Cities, states, businesses, and all other constituency groups in the coalition can opt in and join these efforts to reduce their own emissions and build our clean energy future together. So now I would like to invite Major Lyles, Mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, and co-chair of America is All In, to offer closing remarks. Major Lyles.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, I am Mayor Lyles, Mayor of the City of Charlotte, North Carolina. As the co-chair of America is All In, I am thrilled we convene this event to talk about the many benefits of ambitious climate action. America is All In is the largest coalition of leaders ever assembled in support of climate action in the United States, mobilizing thousands of cities, states, tribal nations, businesses, schools, faith institutions, health, and cultural programs. As you heard today, we are in a time of great opportunity to make the right decisions for a safe and equitable climate future. Thanks to the leadership of my fellow speakers here today and the thousands of others from America is All In, the path ahead is clear. We will invest in clean energy and resilient solutions that have been proven in our communities and businesses. We will put those solutions to work to build the most vulnerable to climate impact, to make prioritizing environmental justice and equity an important part of this program. To meet the ambitious targets President Biden has set in reducing emissions 50 to 52% by 2030, it will take a whole of society approach, with the federal government investing in us to be the partners who can deliver. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, led by President Biden and passed by this Congress, is a strong start. Me and my fellow mayors will use those investments to directly benefit the health and prosperity of our communities. Jobs, infrastructure, and connectivity at the federal level resonates deeply with the work that we're doing here in Charlotte. Ensuring a low carbon and equitable future for our residents is our top priority. This year, we launched our first ever battery electric buses in our transit system, thanks to the help from a federal transit administration grant. Zero emission transportation ensures our residents can breathe cleaner air, and the people who are most affected by climate change and air pollution are already our most vulnerable residents. But we must keep going. We can't leave opportunities on the table and Americans exposed to economic and climate risks. Right now, Congress can enact landmark legislation that lowers consumer prices, creates millions of good-paying jobs, combats climate change, and corrects historic injustices that have impacted communities across the country. Thank you today for the inspiring conversation. And let's keep working towards an equitable climate change program for all of our residents across this country. Thank you again.